Welcome to the silent verdict.
With Clara Monroe and Elias Gray.
Sheriff's Department, Blue. Wake up, man. Sheriff's Department, man, wake up. Don't be swinging. I'm gonna put you in handcuffs. You awake?
Rise and shine.
Sit.
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, man, you need to watch it, Winston. You need to watch it, because you've been real shitty with me. If you step at me like that again, we'll you up, Winston. You understand me?
Yes, sir. I'll never do it again, sir.
Push your sleeves up.
Ever wondered what really happens when police enter a hotel room uninvited, middle of the night?
Yeah, and maybe even without a warrant.
And what if the official story, the report, just doesn't line up with what a body camera actually captured?
That's exactly the kind of unsettling situation we're getting into today.
We are diving deep into an incident from back on January 20th, 2018. This happened in Monongalia County, West Virginia.
Okay.
It involves a deputy, Lance Carezza, and a hotel guest named Quentin Graciano. Police got called out for a disturbance.
Pretty standard call, sounds like.
Initially, yeah. But here's the twist. The police themselves found no laws were broken. No arrests seemed warranted at first.
So why were they still there?
Well, the hotel management, they wanted a group of guests escorted off the property, just asked to leave.
Okay, still sounds fairly routine, if a bit unusual that no crime was found.
Exactly. But that routine request, it took a really dark turn when Deputy Carezza went into Graciano's hotel room.
And Graciano was?
Asleep. He was asleep in his bed. And what followed was a violent confrontation. Yeah, not just some minor scuffle. This whole thing escalated to the point where federal criminal charges were filed against the deputy.
Federal charges. Okay, that's serious.
Absolutely. So our mission today in this deep dive is to really unpack this. We'll use bits from the body cam footage transcript and, crucially, the findings from the federal judge who actually presided over Deputy Carezza's criminal trial.
So we're looking at the actual evidence presented in court,
Yeah.
the judge's view on it.
That's the plan. We want to follow the events as they unfolded and look at the legal fallout.
And there are some big legal questions here, I mean.
Oh, definitely. We'll be touching on things like, Fourth Amendment rights. What rights do you have in a hotel room?
Right. The expectation of privacy.
Exactly. And the rules around police use of force. When is it justified? When does it cross the line?
And the accuracy of police reports, clearly that's going to be a theme.
Huge theme here. And also this legal concept of willfulness. What does it actually mean when you accuse an officer of willfully violating someone's civil rights?
That specific intent element.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. The initial contact. Police called to the hotel, disturbance reported, but as we said, their own investigation on the scene found no laws broken.
Which, right away makes you wonder about the justification for further action. But the hotel wanted them out.
The hotel wanted them out, and here's where things get, let's say, legally interesting almost immediately. Deputy Carezza orders another guest to open the door to a nearby room.
Orders a guest to open another guest's door.
Yes, and inside that room, Quentin Graciano, fast asleep.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah. So a really key legal question pops up right here. Now, this specific point wasn't part of the federal charges against Carezza later, but it's crucial context.
Did the police even have the right to enter that room? Without a warrant, without Graciano's consent, he's asleep, he can't consent?
Exactly. Think about that. Your hotel room. It's supposed to be private, right?
Well, yeah. There's established law on this. The Fourth Circuit, where this happened, follows a major Supreme Court case, Stoner v. California, from way back in '64.
And what's the gist of that?
The core idea is simple. A hotel guest has a reasonable expectation of privacy in their room. It's treated much like your home during your paid stay.
So just because it's a hotel, your rights don't, shrink?
Not generally, no. And critically, the hotel management saying, okay, go in, that's usually not enough. The guest holds the privacy right, not the hotel owner.
Okay. Are there exceptions?
Sure. Things like if your rental period is over, or if the hotel is formally evicting you and taking back the room, or, genuine emergencies, what lawyers call exigent circumstances.
Yeah.
Think immediate danger.
Like someone screaming for help inside, maybe?
Exactly. Or, of course, if the guest voluntarily says, sure, come on in.
But with Graciano asleep? None of those seem to fit.
It certainly doesn't seem like it from the facts presented. He's asleep. The rental period wasn't over. No emergency described.
So that initial entry itself is already on shaky legal ground. It makes you wonder how things might have gone differently.
It definitely sets a questionable stage for everything that follows.
Okay, let's move to the confrontation itself inside the room. Initial reports and later testimony suggested Carezza physically tried to wake Graciano up.
How? Like, shaking him?
Allegedly shaking him, maybe hitting his feet, trying to rouse him physically.
Okay. And Graciano's reaction?
Well, he apparently just stated the obvious, "I'm sleeping." And then things reportedly went downhill very, very fast.
How so?
The accounts suggest Carezza then basically threw Graciano off the bed and started, well, beating him.
Threw him off the bed.
Yeah,
Just for saying he was sleeping.
that's what some evidence indicated. Now, the body cam footage, it gives us a partial picture. It doesn't capture that very first moment inside Graciano's specific room when he was woken.
So there's a gap right at the crucial point. What does the available footage show?
It shows officers outside several rooms trying to get people to step out. You can see Graciano initially just lying on a bed in one room.
Okay.
And even before Carezza goes into that specific room where Graciano is asleep, their interaction, caught on camera, feels tense.
What was happening then?
Carezza's demanding ID, asking Graciano about some fight that was reported. Graciano keeps saying, basically, "I don't know what you're talking about." He seems confused.
Understandable if he was just woken up or wasn't involved.
Right. But what's noticeable is how Carezza's tone escalates. He quickly labels Graciano unhelpful and uncooperative.
Even though Graciano seems to be trying to figure out what's going on, that sounds confrontational from the start.
It does seem that way. Then we get to the moment Carezza enters the room where Graciano is actually asleep.
Right.
The body cam audio picks up Carezza saying, "Wake up, man, Sheriff's Department. Hey, wake up, man."
Okay, so he's announcing himself while waking him.
Yes. And then, almost immediately after those words,
Let me guess.
Carezza's body camera just stops recording. Audio and video. Cut off.
Wow. Right at the most critical moment. What happened in those missing seconds?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it? The abrupt stop is, well, highly suspicious in context. To piece together what happened next, we have to rely on other evidence presented at trial.
Like other officers' cameras, witness testimony.
Exactly. And according to the federal judge reviewing all this, witness testimony suggested Carezza used force on Graciano after he was already restrained in handcuffs.
After. So he's cuffed, supposedly under control, and then force is used.
That's what witnesses indicated. But the government's evidence presented at trial actually argued the force started even earlier. Basically, the moment Graciano woke up to Carezza's, quote, pokes and prods.
So maybe while he was still groggy, half asleep.
Seems like it. And apparently in that state, Graciano sort of swatted at Carezza, not a punch, but an open-handed swat.
Like a reaction to being physically bothered while asleep.
Plausibly, yeah. And then sometime after Carezza's camera cuts out, Graciano ends up face down on the floor.
Prone position. Okay.
And the judge, looking at all the evidence in the light most favorable to the government, which is the standard at that stage.
Right. They have to assume the government's version could be believed by a jury.
Exactly. The judge found that video evidence from other cameras, plus testimony, showed knee strikes and pepper spray being used after Graciano was handcuffed.
Pepper spray after he's handcuffed by multiple officers.
Yes. Handcuffed by multiple officers, Mongold, Carezza, possibly others involved in restraining him. Think about that image. Handcuffed, prone, and then kneed and sprayed.
That seems excessive on its face if he's already restrained.
It certainly raises serious questions. And here's something else that came out. Other officers who were right there on the scene, they testified that they didn't use any force on Graciano once he was handcuffed.
Why not?
Because they didn't think it was necessary. They believed he was under control at that point.
So Carezza's colleagues didn't see the need for more force, but he apparently did.
That's what their testimony suggests. It really isolates Carezza's actions in that moment. Now, let's pivot to Carezza's own account. His official police report. How did he describe what happened?
The paperwork.
Yeah.
This is often where things get interesting in these cases.
And this case is no exception. There are some pretty significant discrepancies between his report and the evidence we just talked about.
Like what?
Well, first off, Carezza's report claimed Graciano struck him first, and that this happened after Graciano was fully awake.
But the other evidence suggested more of a groggy swat in response to being physically woken up.
Exactly. A potentially crucial difference in sequence and intent.
Okay, what else?
His report stated that pepper spray was deployed before they put the handcuffs on Graciano.
But the video showed it happening after he was cuffed.
Directly contradicting the video evidence, and remember, the testimony of those other officers.
That's a major inconsistency.
It is, and there's more. He also wrote that knee strikes were used to gain control before handcuffing.
Again, contradicting the judge's finding based on the evidence presented.
Precisely. The judge specifically pointed out that the evidence indicated those knee strikes happened after Graciano was already restrained.
So the timing of the force seems consistently misrepresented in the report.
It appears that way. And one more thing. Carezza's incident report mentioned he got injured during the struggle.
Okay, officers can get injured, sure.
But interestingly, he apparently didn't mention any injuries on the separate use of force form he was required to fill out.
An omission on one form, an inclusion on another, that adds to the pattern of inconsistencies.
It really does. Taken together, it paints a picture where the official narrative seems, shall we say, constructed to perhaps justify the level of force used, and it diverges sharply from the other available evidence.
Which leads us to the criminal trial. All this evidence, these contradictions. What happened when it went before a jury?
Well, this is where it gets legally complex. The federal judge, before the jury deliberated, looked at all the prosecution's evidence and basically said, yes, there is enough here for a reasonable jury to convict Carezza of civil rights violations.
So the judge thought the evidence was legally sufficient.
Correct. But the jury found him not guilty.
Not guilty. Despite the judge's assessment and the evidence we've discussed, how does that happen?
It hinges almost entirely on that concept we mentioned earlier, willfulness.
The intent standard again. Explain that a bit more in this context.
Okay, so in a criminal trial for violating someone's civil rights under federal law specifically, using excessive force under color of law, the prosecution has an incredibly high burden of proof. They have to prove the defendant acted willfully.
And willfully means more than just intentionally doing the act, right? It's not just that he intentionally kneed or sprayed Graciano.
Exactly. It means he acted voluntarily and intentionally with the specific intent to do something the law forbids. In this case, the specific intent to deprive Graciano of his constitutional right to be free from unreasonable force.
So they had to prove Carezza knew his actions were unlawful and excessive and did it anyway.
Precisely. It's not enough to show the force was excessive. They had to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Carezza knew it was excessive and illegal in that moment and made a conscious decision to violate Graciano's right.
That sounds really hard to prove. You're trying to get inside the officer's head.
It is notoriously difficult. And this is likely where the testimony from the other officers, even though some of it seemed damning regarding the necessity of force, it might have actually helped the defense.
How so? By maybe suggesting confusion or a chaotic scene?
Possibly. Or the defense could argue that if even other officers were present and involved in the restraint, maybe Carezza genuinely, if mistakenly, believed his actions were necessary in the heat of the moment. Or, crucially, they could argue he was poorly trained or just didn't know the precise legal line he was crossing.
Ignorance of the law or lack of specific intent, basically.
Right. It muddies the waters regarding that willfulness element. If the jury has any reasonable doubt about whether Carezza had that specific intent to violate the law, they have to acquit.
And Carezza himself didn't testify.
No, he exercised his right not to testify. So the jury never heard his side directly, his explanation of his state of mind.
Which means the prosecution had to rely entirely on inferring his intent from his actions and the surrounding circumstances.
Correct. So that not guilty verdict. It's crucial for you, the listener, to understand it doesn't mean the jury decided no excessive force occurred or that Carezza did nothing wrong.
It just means the prosecution didn't meet that incredibly high burden of proving criminal intent willfulness beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly. A civil case with a lower burden of proof, preponderance of the evidence, might have a very different outcome, and indeed, we'll get to that.
Okay, that distinction is vital. Now, you mentioned Carezza's camera cutout, but another officer's camera kept rolling.
Yes, Deputy Coe's camera captured more of the aftermath, and honestly, some of the things recorded on it are deeply disturbing.
What kind of things?
Well, Carezza is heard saying some really chilling stuff in the context of everything that just happened. Things like, you want the solution, give me the solution, there's the solution.
The solution? What's that supposed to mean? Force.
It certainly sounds like it. And also, I got that problem solver, man. Again, suggesting force as a solution or problem solver.
And this is after Graciano is subdued.
Yes. And what's maybe even more unsettling is what happened when Deputy Mongold, one of the other officers there, was asked about these statements in court.
Did he explain what Carezza meant?
He claimed he had no memory of Carezza saying those things, or even of himself allegedly saying, give him the solution, which was also picked up.
No recollection of language like problem solver right after a violent arrest.
None claimed. Despite admitting Graciano was already handcuffed when these remarks were supposedly made, that lack of memory itself seems convenient, perhaps.
Yeah, that's one word for it. Did Coe's camera show anything else?
Oh, yes. It reportedly shows Carezza using the pepper spray on Graciano while he's handcuffed.
So visual confirmation of the pepper spray after handcuffing.
Appears so. And then making these just incredibly callous remarks afterwards. Things like caliente man, apparently referring to the pepper spray, and even worrying about fixing his own tie shortly after using force on a restrained person.
Fixing his tie, it sounds completely detached, almost casual, like it was just another day at the office.
The lack of concern is jarring, and his behavior apparently didn't just involve Graciano.
Who else?
The footage also reportedly captured Carezza acting aggressively towards another person at the scene, someone named Winston.
What did he do to Winston?
Demanding he not spit, forcibly fingerprinting him right there, apparently threatening him with more violence, making degrading comments. It paints a picture of someone seemingly out of control, abusing their authority.
So the aggression wasn't isolated just to Graciano, it continued.
It seems so. And then there's a quote attributed to Carezza himself, reflecting on his own actions later. "Even when I was hitting you an expletive, that was me calm."
He considered that calm. What would not calm look like? That's terrifying, frankly.
It's deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
The footage also apparently captured a moment involving Winston potentially having soiled himself out of fear or during the incident.
Oh, goodness.
And Carezza's reaction to that was also reportedly callous and lacking any basic human decency. Just a really ugly picture overall painted by that additional footage.
So putting it all together, the questionable entry, the force used after handcuffing, the discrepancies in the report, the acquittal on criminal charges due to the willfulness standard, and then these comments and actions caught on the other camera. What were the ultimate consequences here for Graciano, for Carezza?
Well, first, for Graciano, the prosecutor's office eventually dismissed all the charges that had been filed against him in the wake of the incident.
Which kind of implies they didn't think they had a good case against him.
Yeah.
Maybe acknowledging the arrest itself was problematic.
That's a reasonable inference. Also, Graciano filed a civil lawsuit against Carezza and the county.
Okay, the civil route, where the burden of proof is lower. How did that go?
That lawsuit was settled. The county agreed to pay Graciano $175,000.
A significant amount. Civil settlements often happen to avoid the risk and expense of a trial, but that figure suggests the county saw some real liability risk there.
It certainly does. It's an acknowledgement, at least financially, that something went wrong. But now, the consequence, or lack thereof, for Deputy Carezza.
Given everything we've heard, was he fired? Disciplined?
Yeah. Here's the part that I think leaves many people stunned. Despite the federal judge finding sufficient evidence for potential conviction, despite the settlement in the civil suit, despite the deeply troubling body cam evidence and testimony, Deputy Lance Carezza is reportedly still working as a police officer?
Still employed. In the same county. After all of that.
As far as reports indicate, yes. Still on the force in Monongalia County, West Virginia. Let that sink in for you for a moment.
Wow. That really underscores the difficulty in achieving actual accountability, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even with video, even with a judge saying the evidence is there, the system has hurdles.
It absolutely does. And maybe that's the biggest key takeaway from this whole deep dive. Holding law enforcement accountable, especially in the criminal system for civil rights violations, is incredibly complex.
That willfulness standard is a massive barrier.
A massive barrier. And jury perceptions, trial strategy, witness testimony, it all plays a role. This case, with so much seemingly captured on video, really throws into sharp relief the profound questions about officer conduct, the trustworthiness of official accounts versus objective recordings, and the systemic roadblocks to justice.
And shows the power, but also the limitations of body cameras, doesn't it? They capture evidence, yes, but they don't automatically guarantee a particular outcome or ensure accountability on their own.
A very good point. They are a tool, but not a magic bullet. So, okay, we've walked you through this really troubling sequence of events. A man asleep in his hotel bed, woken by police, a violent encounter, a body cam that conveniently cuts out.
An official report that seems to conflict with other evidence.
Right. Knee strikes and pepper spray used on a handcuffed man, disturbing comments caught later. And yet, no criminal conviction, though a civil settlement was paid. What does all this tell you, listening right now, about accountability, about the power dynamic, about how hard it can be to get justice even when things seem clear?
It forces you to think critically about the systems we have in place, for sure.
And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. Knowing what you know now about this case, where there was video evidence, where a judge found the evidence sufficient for a jury to potentially convict, Consider this.
What hope do individuals have when the evidence isn't as clear-cut, when there isn't a body cam or the footage is ambiguous?
Exactly. If the criminal system couldn't secure a conviction here, what does that mean for countless other situations? What kind of fundamental systemic changes might be needed to actually bridge that gap between what we sometimes see happen and the justice that ultimately gets served? Or doesn't?
It's a really sobering question. A lot to think about.